Hey guys, what do you think this is? Is it some kind of weird satellite or maybe just a really big coin? Well, actually, it's neither of those things. This massive object is actually an ordinary rock that's been covered with strange symbols that have left researchers scratching their heads for centuries. But what are these strange markings and how did they get there? Join us as we look at one of the most mysterious archaeological finds in Scottish history. This is the Cochno stone. Our story begins in 1897 when two brothers named John and George Stewart were working on a farm near the town of Denny in central Scotland. The pair had been hired to drain a small pond that was located on top of a hill. As they worked, they noticed something strange in the muck at the bottom of the water. It was a large stone slab weighing over 2 tons. At first, they assumed it was nothing more than a boring old rock, but they soon realized that there were strange markings all over its surface. Realizing they may have just stumbled upon something special, they alerted local landowner Thomas Ritchie. He oversaw excavations around the rock to determine if it was part of a larger structure, but no other stones were found. Still, he knew that it deserved further investigation. So he contacted renowned archaeologist Joseph Anderson. Anderson quickly realized that they had indeed discovered something amazing. And while he didn't know exactly what it was, he knew that it was likely extremely rare. Unfortunately, Anderson passed away before he could investigate further, and the mystery of the stone remained unsolved for decades. The stone was then moved to a local museum where it sat gathering dust until 1963, when it was brought to the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. Here, researchers used X-ray technology to peer inside the rock to see if they could determine how the markings got there. What they found shocked them. Researchers discovered that the symbols weren't just carved into the surface of the stone, they were actually embedded deep within it. The markings looked like a huge puzzle, but no one could figure out what they meant. Archaeologists estimated that the rock was around 5,000 years old and had probably been used for some sort of religious purpose. But what exactly did the symbols mean, and who put them there? In 1974, a researcher named Aubrey Burrell proposed that the rock monolith may have had something to do with astronomy. After all, many ancient cultures around the world used rocks and stones to keep track of time. Researchers determined that the stone had been erected during the late Neolithic period, which lasted from around 4000 BC to 2500 BC. This was at a time when humans were just beginning to farm the land and settle into communities. Life was still very primitive, and people believed that the natural world was full of spirits and deities. Many ancient cultures built structures like Stonehenge to worship their gods and to observe the stars above. Some archaeologists believe that the Cochno stone may have been used in a similar way, but why would they choose such a random spot to build a religious monument? Today, Scotland is famous for its rolling hills and lush green landscapes, but around 5,000 years ago, the country looked very different. During the Ice Age, much of Scotland was covered in thick sheets of ice and snow. These glaciers carved out valleys and left behind vast expanses of barren rock. As the ice melted, the land began to bloom with new life, but this dramatic change in scenery was not lost on the humans who lived there. They saw the beauty of the land and the power of nature firsthand and began to worship the forces of the earth and sky. It's believed that the Cochno Stone Monument may have been built to honor the arrival of spring and the rebirth of the earth after the long winter months. It was a celebration of the natural world and the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. To support his theory, Burrell pointed out that several of the symbols on the stone resemble modern constellations. In particular, he noted that the Bullrich constellation was prominent in the Scottish Neolithic sky at around 4000 BC. If the Cochno stone was indeed used for astronomical purposes, it would make it one of the oldest known examples of humans tracking the stars. This would also explain why the stone was erected on top of a hill. In ancient times, hilltops were often seen as sacred places where the veil between the earthly and celestial realms was at its thinnest. By placing the stone on a hill, the ancient builders would have been able to better connect with the universe and the gods. Unfortunately, Burrell's theory was met with skepticism by many archaeologists who believed that there was not enough evidence to support his claims. They argued that the symbols on the stone could just as easily be interpreted as abstract designs or even random markings left behind by erosion. But this isn't the only theory about the Cochno stone. Another popular idea is that the symbols represent a type of code that can be deciphered to reveal secret knowledge. Proponents of this theory believe that the ancient builders of the stone left behind a message for us to find, but so far, no one has been able to crack the code. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Cochno stone is the fact that we don't know for sure how it was created. We do know that the symbols were not carved into the stone, but rather pecked into it using a sharp tool. The pecking technique created small pits that are only visible under close inspection. If you were to view the stone from a distance, the markings would be almost impossible to see. This led some researchers to believe that the stone may have been used as a type of counting device. Each pit could represent a certain number or a certain unit of measurement, but again, without any historical records or other examples to go off of, it's impossible to say for sure. What we do know is that the stone was likely used for some sort of ritualistic purpose. The creators of the stone took great care to align it with the cardinal directions, and astronomers have noticed that the grooves in the rock monolith correspond to the paths of the sun and moon. This suggests that the stone may have been used to track the phases of the moon or to mark the solstices and equinoxes. Some researchers even believe that the stone monolith may have been used to predict eclipses. One theory is that the ancient builders of the stone observed the shadow cast by the stone on the ground. As the moon passed in front of the sun, this would cause the shadow to take on a strange shape. By tracking the changes in the shadow's shape and size, they may have been able to predict when an eclipse would occur. There's even speculation that the Cochno stone may have been used to predict the end of the world. According to some sources, the stone is covered with carvings of dragons and other mythical creatures. These creatures are often seen as symbols of chaos and destruction. Some researchers believe that the ancient builders of the stone saw these symbols as representing the end of days. It's possible that they believed that the world would end in a great cataclysm, just as the dragons and other mythical beasts were destroying the world in their carvings. While this may sound far-fetched, it's important to remember that the ancient builders of the stone lived in a very different time period than our own. They had no scientific understanding of the world and were often at the mercy of the elements. To them, the world as they knew it could end at any moment. The truth is, we may never know for sure what the ancient builders of the stone intended it to be used for. The markings on the stone are simply too mysterious, and there is no historical evidence to shed light on the matter. We can only speculate and piece together the puzzle based on the information that we have available to us. What do you think? Was the Cochno stone used for astronomy, religious rituals, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Now watch. Weird, prehistoric cave paintings that make no sense. Or check out insane true stories of ancient people surviving the apocalypse.